Good to be with you all today, and we are blessed to have Ryan today. I know many of you on the call, but I've served the Y 44 years before retiring a couple years ago, and I knew about the archives, but have never been. And as I've gotten to spend a little time with Ryan preparing for this, Ryan, you've really been instrumental in giving me a little more knowledge about what you do and the work there. And I'm now vowed and determined to come and visit you and see all the work that's happening there. But Ryan, would you maybe begin by telling us, I think you said you've been there about 20 years, how you really landed at the archives, how you got there, and then, what motivates you around that work every day. A very unique position.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, thank you everyone for inviting me to share space with you. I'm very honored for that. The short version is I was smart enough to know that I had a good thing going with the person who would later become my wife. The slightly longer version is that I was attending University of Iowa, and my wife had graduated ahead of me, and decided to follow her up to Minneapolis, hence the transferring to Concordia University in St. Paul. I was a youth worker prior to that, working Salvation Army and the YMCA, and I quickly saw burnout in that direction. I was a social worker without a social work degree, so I didn't have the skills or the tools beyond empathy and experience to work with the kids. But I was a history major and really focused on progressive era labor history, as the modern Y was coming into being, study that period. So my advisor said, if you do an internship, we'll take all your credits. Well, that was easy. And then it just clicked immediately. I'd never, spent a lot of my childhood in libraries and never thought about library profession, but it just made perfect sense. When I opened the boxes, I know what it's like to work in an organization like the Y. I know what it's like to work in community with kids. And so to be able to continue to be of service professionally for others, and to match sort of those twin interests and passions of serving others and learning from history, it was a match.com, as they say. So
good. And tell us a little bit about your work there, what you do.
Yeah, sure. So we preserve, provide access, and then importantly for the constituency of the YMCA, contextualize the rich heritage of the American YMCA movement. I'm an employee of the University of Minnesota, so I work with the Y, not for the Y, though the funds for my salary come from a contract with YUSA. Like I said, it's a service-oriented profession, so anybody and their brother is welcome to come and ask a question, and so long as it's about the Y, I can help them. If it's not, I'll try to help them find where they would look for that. So we work with students, helping them do research, helping them write papers, work with YMCAs as they try to understand their organizational history, and groups like this. And I just really admire, and particularly, the last 5 years or so, how the Y is really leaning into its history and trying to better understand itself. I'm a believer that, we're all products of the past. And so that defines us in ways seen and unseen. And in my quest to understand myself and who I am, learning from history is a critical tool for that. And I very much admire the Y's openness to look at, understand, and critique its own organizational history and how it's showed up in the past and how that informs the present.
Yeah, but it's so true. I've heard the analysis before. You can't write the history of America without writing a history of the Y, because it overlays so well with that, as does, the entire world for that matter. Well, so changing gears a minute, well, thank you for that. And again, blessed to have you on this interview. And Nancy did a nice job with the introduction there, but I want to talk just a minute around, you don't profess to be a Christian. And as you know, this is a group that's been revolved around predominantly Christian-based involvement with our volunteers and staff. I think we're very interested and intrigued why you chose to take the interview. And would you mind sharing a little bit of that with us? And I know you and I talked last week again, and I was impressed with that conversation you and I had.
Yeah, no, as Nancy shared, I was raised Catholic, and I went to a Protestant school. And so, the Christianity, the Christian heritage, in ways known and unknown is, what my personal ethos was been built around. I'm very conversant of it. And, I wasn't just raised Catholic. I was on the church council until 2002. So, I was in pretty deep in terms of the organization. I appreciate the tradition, the ways to serve and being and all of that. And why I wanted it, well, one, maybe it's part of being Catholic and it's also being service. Someone asked me for help, I'm inclined to say, yes, of course I'll help you. Sure, why not? But more fully than that, though, I really appreciate being eyes wide open. And I've talked with Janelle quite a bit, and Tim Hallman as well. And you all know where I come from and where I stand. And so that invitation to share that, I really admire and respect that openness. And what I've seen through this group and the conversations you have is a very inclusive approach to Christianity. And, Christianity is an incredibly diverse set of religious traditions. And I know some other questions we'll kind of broach on this later, that fits with the why. And so looking at past interviews, I'm really inspired by the nature of these conversations, is that it calls people to share their experiences that don't just stop at Christian witness, but go on to acts of faith and ways of being and being in the community. And, that for me, good is good is good. And so I admire that your personal starting points, and I very much respect the openness to identify people who might be in alignment with you, though they may have different starting points.
Yeah, good point. Well, and that's, as we continue to think about that, trying to be open with this group and even the movement in general for all, how we really acknowledge that with our diversity and inclusiveness is so important. So I think that was a big reason for us asking you. And this, though it's been a bit of a turn from those we've interviewed in the past, we're thankful for your willingness to do that. So changing gears again a little bit, from your perspective internationally and nationally, we've had moments of time in the history and movement of the organization. Talk to us a little bit about that, maybe defining moments in history that you've seen, and maybe sort of where you see us at today.
Sure, yeah. With respect to Christian emphasis, it's a thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about, because that's, the starting point for the why. It's embedded in the DNA of the organization, and in my quest to understand what is this thing called the YMCA. I can't articulate that or do my job if I can't get my head around the Christian tradition. But
Ryan Breen is
Ryan,
frozen. Yeah,
you froze there, Ryan.
And then you're pouring yourself a Coke. Just these sequence of events seem random and unconnected, but there's an invisible thread that unites that prayer meeting in 1844 and all of us sitting here today. And the Christian identity is a piece of that. And so when I think about the history of the why and George Williams, I look at, today it may look exclusive, but from the context of the time, it was, in some regards, radically inclusive. Protestantism was fracturing left and right along ideological and political lines. And they took a step back and said, we have less concern of which house you sit in and more concern that you sit in a house. Now, as a young 20-year-old Catholic, Ryan would not have been invited until 50 years later or so. But even within that space, there's this germ of inclusivity, this germ of saying who else is here. And I can share a quick anecdote within George Williams early on, as doctrinal divisions would creep in and threaten the formation of the why. Well, are they really Christian over in Ireland? That sort of thing. And you would say, how does that help us win men? And they would step back and look at your character, the fabric of your being. What you do was what the why was interested in. First preserving character, later developing character and nurturing character. So I just find that just like a very inspirational, radical notion that collectively we can make a difference in the world. It's not just a place to go, right? The Y was a revolutionary reform movement about starting internally, but it wasn't to stop internally. It was always community oriented. It was always action oriented. It was always getting out into the streets. And so that diversity of thought and evolution of thought, right? When we say, what does it see in the Y? And if we look at George Williams as the example, is it the nonconformist evangelical of his youth or the Church of England he would later marry into, right? These things are fluid and it's dynamic. And for me, I find a lot of beauty in that evolution and change, not consternation.
So how would you compare, based on your chair today, the inclusivity that they were facing in that conversation around diversity and what we see today? Can you draw any kind of parallel on that relationship?
Yeah, you know, I think so obviously it was incredibly restrictive in a broader social sense, right? Women weren't allowed. It was predominantly a white middle class aspirational sort of institution. So if we carve that out for the sake of this dialogue, you know, I think there was a much greater tolerance for diversity of thought back then. That was the point, actually, was to get people from a diverse spectrum of starting points, but had an alignment of the direction of where they wanted to go. And so with that regard, you know, I think it's a powerful example. It strikes me as an object lesson in, you know, what is the difference between unity and conformity? And I think they were very much about Christian unity rather than there is a right way and a wrong way to approach it.
Yeah, good point. And as you continue to think about that, what do you see in current day the challenges before us as we think about our mission and our Christian influence in the work? I mean, a lot of our colleagues around the country are having this conversation as we talked last week, and various groups are looking at it. You know, YMCA has even talked about that with part of their strategic planning process being foundational.
Yeah.
What would be your response around that, Ryan?
Well, you know, my concerns would center around factionalism. And, you know, as you said, you couldn't write a history of America without a history of the Y. That's 100% true. Some people have called, you know, the Y a mirror to America. It's sort of a fun house mirror. It doesn't cover everything. It distorts certain.
Ryan, you froze up again there. Ryan. Ryan, you're frozen.
I'm gonna chat him and see if that helps.
Okay.
Must have been divine intervention there.
Divine intervention. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Can you pick him back up, please? Get him back.
Yeah, I heard I was frozen there. So I'll just rewind a second. What I was saying was the concerns is, you know, if you follow this idea of the Y being a mirror to America, the divisions within our current society, I know, are found within the YMCA as well, and within the branch as well, you know, between board and leadership and staff and all of that. And so, you know, if you look back in the past, when the Y would gather, they would vigorously debate and share their perspectives and their faith, and they would try to suss out what is the C and the Y, and they would ultimately come to yes. You know, whatever you ask 100 people what the C means, you get 100 answers, and they're all correct because it's the personal manifestation is what the Y was really centered on. And, you know, this whole know thyself sort of notion is what I see coming from that. And my concern is the factionalism and lack of respect for different interpretations and willingness to have other people's perspectives not be a threat to your own perspective is something that I'm very concerned about. You know, from where I said, I would think I see the diversity of thought even just within the Christian emphasis within the why, should be a great space of inspiration, not a space of division in fighting for, which one is correct, or which one is proper. And that's a dynamic as old as Christendom and as old as religion. I realize it's many things are a part of that. But I will say also, though, that's my hope for the why, and that's why I engage in this work, is because if the why, it's a microcosm, it's almost a workable group of people. So if the why could somehow bridge any of these chasms that allow people to be seen and heard, and therefore create understanding and create respect and maybe community, then what a gift, right? But ego would need to be set aside, hubris would need to be set aside, openness, listening, a lot of things that collectively aren't necessarily really great at. But I do believe the why has the capacity for it, for sure.
Well, and the word we've been talking about a lot, around the movement has been dialogue, having dialogue about it. So as you think about all those years of history, what can we learn from that? What have we really learned, and what do we need to remember? What do we need to forget as we do think about this dialogue? Do you have some additional thoughts about that?
Yeah, sure. I would say what you need to forget is that the why is any one thing. Whatever you're doing now is just what you're doing now. I'm convinced if I had a big enough budget, I would create a matrix of all the different things the why did, and probably be able to predict, okay, you're here now, you're probably going to be in this manifestation next, and you're probably going to be in this manifestation next. And the thing is, there's no right way of being. The right way of being is in relation to the needs that are happening. And so is the why capacity building, or is the why intervening in crisis? It has capacity for both. And so, to relearn, to remember, is to be in dialogue with your community, whatever that is. There are actually communities within our community, right? And so be in authentic relation with your communities, and just ask them what they need, and convene your resources and bring those resources to bear and share. And that's what the history shows, is the Y has this amazing capacity to identify unmet needs and create solutions, not to create the next big innovation. They didn't invent basketball to hope, create the NBA and this billion-dollar enterprise. It was a solution to a problem. And good ideas stick when they're relevant and they connect with people. And so that openness to fail, openness to try, openness to be different, always asking what's next, that's something that I think is a muscle that maybe has gotten a little anemic over the years, as the business model has gotten so front and center of decision making and ways of being within the organization.
That's so true. And I think we refer to ourselves as a movement, and I think what you just described, we truly are a movement. And each piece of that is moving. It's on our watch now, no matter what chair we're sitting in, no matter what community we're sitting in. How do we advance that? Beyond this Christian emphasis conversation, are there other topics you think the movement should be thinking about from both a historical or a futuristic standpoint, and what opportunities that might present?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that question. And I think it's part and parcel of everything we're talking about, is what does it mean to be the movement? What is the federated structure? And what is the responsibility at the association level, at the staff level, to be engaged and to nurture that? One of the questions that we had talked about last time is, is it a weakness or a strength, this difference? And it's both. And it's a weakness when it's not engaged, when it's pro forma, when you're running the scripts, when you show up for the t-shirt, sort of thing. And it's a strength when it's active, when it's engaged, when it's healthy in debate, when it's solution oriented, not centering any one individual, but open to building bridges and finding our common humanity and sharing that's what the movement is. I give a presentation, and from where I sit, the Y sometimes like a herd of cats, right? And so you look at a herd of cats and it looks like they're going every which way direction. You zoom out far enough and you'll see, here's your fun fact for trivia night, the clouder, that's what a herd of cats is called. You see the clouder sort of, it does move in certain ways. It's drawn to certain things. It moves away from certain things. And that being in sync with each other and the very knowing where you stand in relation to others is a sign of a healthy movement. And I'd like to see more conversation on not being a movement, but what does it mean to be a movement, and what is each of our individual responsibility to nurture that.
Yeah, really good. We're going to wrap up here shortly and go into our break. Anything else you'd like to share, Ryan, around either the archives or your work or any perspective? I mean, you have a very, very unique perspective sitting in your chair than a lot of other people we've interviewed, not just because you're not a professed Christian, but the fact that you do the work you do, you have the history, your knowledge base is incredible, being able to see the past as well as where we are today, and maybe even has some of that forecast the future. Any last comments you'd want to share with us as we wrap up, or any other dialogue we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity. One, like I started at the beginning, librarians are service oriented to a fault, and so you ask a question and we'll give you a reading list, right? And so please do feel open to reaching out to the archives if you have a question about anything to do with the history of the YMCA. The other thing is, be curious about your own histories of your association. Therein lies the invisible barriers that thwart things that you're trying to accomplish and do. Therein lie opportunities hidden because they've been forgotten. And the thing is what I like to tell people, especially in the modern Y, where people move around as they've progressed through their career, the institutional memory is, oftentimes as big as the longest serving person there. And that person may not have positional authority to actually speak that history that they know. But I will tell you, the community knows very well what the Y has and has not done for it in the past. And so I very much encourage you to get curious about your histories, to complicate the narratives, whatever you're told about the history of your branch, unpack that, learn about it, see what's missing, see who's telling that story, what is gained, what is thwarted through telling that, and just get really curious, because it's a pretty powerful exercise, and you end up learning a lot about yourself in the process.
Thank you. Well, we really, on behalf of the entire group, thank you, Ryan. I'm sure this has raised a lot of questions, eyebrows, a lot of things for a lot of people around the next steps. And we just thank you for your willingness and courage to come on with this group and have a transparent and frank conversation. Bless you. We'll let you go. And I think I'm turning it back to you, Nancy.